My name is Elise, I'm 36, and I haven't told anyone this, not my sister, not my therapist, not even my reflection, but something inside me cracked open that night at my grandfather's house. I didn't cheat, at least not in the way people define it. But I betrayed someone. Or maybe I betrayed myself. I'm still trying to figure that out. I used to believe that love, real love, was something you grew into. Like a worn-in sweater, something soft and dependable, maybe not thrilling every second, but warm. Secure. I thought I had that with Daniel. For 12 years, he was my best friend, my person, the man I pictured every version of a future with. We met in our mid-20s at a gallery opening neither of us wanted to attend. I remember laughing at something he said, something sarcastic and stupid, and feeling it hit somewhere low in my stomach. He touched the small of my back as we walked out into the night, and it felt like the beginning of everything. God, I used to crave him. We couldn't keep our hands off each other in the early years, like magnets under skin. We had this electricity, this ease, like we belonged in each other's orbit. Even after we moved in together, even after the ordinary routines settled around us like dust, there was still this undercurrent of playfulness, of touch. He'd pull me into him in the kitchen, kiss my neck while I stirred pasta, mouth hot on my shoulder. I'd climb into his lap after a long day and he'd groan like I was the best part of it. But somewhere in the years, between bills and fatigue and learning how to argue without breaking each other, something shifted. Slowly, almost imperceptibly. I can't tell you the day the kisses started to feel like punctuation instead of poetry. Or when sex became something I initiated to feel close, only to leave the bed feeling lonelier. There wasn't a blow-up. No betrayal. Just erosion. A slow, quiet fading. I'd lean into him on the couch, and he'd wrap an arm around me, but it felt absent, like he was performing affection. Like we both were. The warmth was there, technically, but it didn't melt anything anymore. Last month, I stood in the bathroom brushing my teeth, watching him in the mirror. He walked up behind me, pressed his lips to my cheek. A sweet, habitual kiss. But my skin didn't stir. My heart didn't jump. I swallowed a sigh and smiled at him in the glass. And for a moment, I wondered if he noticed how I flinched inside. And yet, it's not just about him. It's about me. About how I've changed, and how I didn't notice it happening. I used to write poetry in the margins of notebooks. I used to dance barefoot in our kitchen at midnight. Now I scroll through other people's lives with numb fingers and wonder where my own went. Last weekend, we were at my grandfather's house. He's 89 and sharper than anyone I know. He sees things. That night, he poured me a glass of wine and asked if I was happy. Not how's Daniel, or how's work. Just that. Are you happy, Elise? I couldn't answer him. I smiled. I nodded. But something in my throat tightened. And when I looked at him, really looked, I could tell he knew. He just nodded, too, and we sat there in silence. That was the moment. That's when I realized I didn't recognize the woman I'd become. When I realized how much of myself I'd buried beneath being fine. Something happened that night. Not with Daniel. Not even with my grandfather. With me. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Daniel's a paramedic. The kind of man who runs toward burning wreckage without blinking. He's calm in chaos, level-headed, steady. That's what first drew me in, how safe he made everything feel. Like if the world started crumbling, he'd hold up the ceiling with his bare hands. But in the quiet hours, in the soft, murky places where emotions tangle, he doesn't know what to do with me. The Monday after the visit to my grandfather's, he came home after a 16-hour shift. I was sitting on the couch in one of his old sweatshirts, still thinking about that night. I'd written a few lines in my journal, something about drowning in a house that looks like home. I felt raw and exposed, though I hadn't said a word. Daniel dropped his keys in the bowl, came over behind me, and without a word, pulled me back into his chest. His hand slid under my sweatshirt, fingertips grazing my waist. To him, it was connection. A hello. An offering. To me, it felt like bypassing the ache, like trying to bandage a wound he wouldn't look at. I didn't pull away, but I didn't melt into him either. He noticed. I know he did. You okay? He asked, his voice soft, lips brushing my ear. I'm just tired, I said, even though what I meant was I feel hollow. He kissed my neck, a little more insistent this time, and his hands moved lower. I shifted slightly, not in rejection, just hesitation. That's when I felt him withdraw. Not physically, he stayed, but emotionally. Like a curtain dropped between us. He let go, stood up, and said, I'm gonna shower, like I'd somehow rejected him, not the moment. It kept happening in small, sharp ways. Tuesday night, I cooked dinner. Roasted vegetables, salmon, a lemon glaze I used to make when we were still trying to impress each other. He walked in late, kissed my cheek, barely tasted the food before glancing at his phone. I asked about his day, and he told me about a call, a teenager who overdosed. I listened, nodding, murmuring the right responses, but when I asked how he felt about it, he shrugged. It's part of the job. And maybe it is. But I wanted to touch the part of him beneath the uniform. The Daniel I used to know when the lights were low and the world was quiet. The one who used to cry with me over stupid commercials and whisper his worst fears into the pillow at 2 a.m. Instead, he reached for my hand across the table. I let him hold it. But it felt like holding hands with a ghost, polite, practiced. Later that night, in bed, he turned toward me and kissed my shoulder. His hand slipped under my shirt again, warm and familiar. And I wanted to want it. I wanted to feel desired. I wanted to meet him there. But all I felt was pressure. Like I was supposed to play a part. I'm sorry, I whispered, turning onto my side. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, is it me? Did I do something? No, I said quickly, too quickly. It's not you. But the truth was, it was him. And it wasn't. It was the way we were orbiting the same bed, the same routine, without ever actually colliding anymore. It was how he thought skin meant intimacy, and I needed him to see my mind first, the storm behind my eyes, the ache under my breath. But how do you say that to someone who saves lives for a living? Who's so used to putting out fires, he doesn't recognize when something's slowly freezing? We laid there, backs to each other, the silence thick. I thought about my grandfather, about how he looked at me like he saw me. And Daniel, my Daniel, the man who once traced poems on my hips and called me his home, was right next to me. But I'd never felt more alone. It's a Wednesday night. I'm chopping vegetables in the kitchen when Daniel comes up behind me, wraps his arms around my waist, and presses a kiss to the back of my neck. It's gentle. Familiar. And still, I freeze. He doesn't notice at first. His hands slip under my hoodie, palm warm against my stomach. He murmurs something about how good the kitchen smells. His voice is low and lazy, the way it gets when he's tired but trying to be sweet, to be close. I know what this is leading to. I can already feel his body leaning into mine. There's a script we've followed for years. A kiss here, a touch there. A laugh. And then we disappear into the bedroom like nothing's wrong. But something is wrong. I tense, just slightly, a stutter of breath, a stiffening of my spine, and he notices this time. He steps back just enough to look at me. Hey, he says. Did I do something? I shake my head too fast. No. I'm cooking. He doesn't push. He never pushes. That's part of the problem. He doesn't ask the real questions anymore. He just tucks the hurt away and goes quiet. Later, after dinner, we sit on the couch. I'm curled into one end with my legs tucked under me, trying to lose myself in a documentary neither of us is really watching. Daniel's scrolling on his phone, but I can feel him looking over at me every few minutes. When he finally sets the phone down and shifts closer, I brace for it. "You've been distant lately," he says softly. "I don't know if you're stressed or mad at me or what." "I'm just tired," I say, again. He sighs and rubs his hands over his face. "You're always tired lately." "I know," I say, quieter. "I don't mean to be." There's a beat of silence. Then he reaches for my thigh, rubbing slow circles with his thumb. "Let me help you relax," he says, voice dropping into something that's supposed to be sexy, comforting. It should be sweet. It should work. But something recoils inside me. I flinch, not a full jerk away, just a shift. Like my body's trying to protect itself from something that shouldn't feel threatening. He freezes. His hand stays there, unsure now. "Sorry," I mumble. "I'm just not in the mood." He pulls back like he touched a flame. Leans into the couch with a sigh. "Elise, it's not just tonight. It's like every time I try to be close, you shut down." "I'm trying," I say, voice suddenly sharp. I didn't mean it to be. But the edge is there now, slicing through the quiet. I can't fake it, Daniel. I'm not there right now." His jaw clenches. "So what am I supposed to do? Not touch you? Just wait until you feel like letting me back in?" I stare at the TV, blurry now. "I don't know," I whisper. "I don't know what I need." He stands. Paces the room once, then stops and looks at me. "I'm not the enemy here, Elise. I love you. I'm trying." And I believe him. I do. But love feels like something we're both repeating out of habit, like an old prayer we forgot the meaning of. I nod, lips pressed tight. He walks away. And I sit there in the flickering blue light of the screen, hollowed out. The thing is, I do want him. I miss craving him. I miss the version of us where my skin lit up just from his hand on the small of my back. But lately, every kiss feels like pressure. Every touch feels like expectation. And in my head, the words whisper again, unwelcome but honest, why does everything have to turn into sex? Friday night, Daniel made reservations. He told me in that proud, hopeful tone he uses when he's trying to fix something he doesn't quite understand. 8 o'clock. That little Italian place you like. Fig and Vine. I nodded, said thank you, even smiled, because that's what I'm supposed to do, right? Pretend the gesture is enough. Pretend I'm not unraveling inside. I wore the green dress he likes. The one that hugs me in all the places he used to worship with his hands and his mouth. I put on lipstick. I curled my hair. I even caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and thought, you look like someone who has it together. But I didn't feel like her. At dinner, everything looked perfect. Dim lights, clinking glasses, the scent of rosemary and garlic. He ordered a bottle of wine, reached across the table for my hand, and smiled like nothing was broken. He talked about his day, a cardiac arrest they barely saved, a coworker who's getting divorced. I nodded along, sipped wine, chewed food I couldn't taste. Then he said, I was thinking, maybe we could take a weekend away next month. Just us. Reset. And something inside me cracked. Not because it was a bad idea. Not because I didn't want that. But because I knew exactly what he meant by reset. Hotel room. Long drive. Forced laughter. Awkward foreplay. Pretending everything is fine. Coming home with silence between us dressed up as peace. I set down my fork too hard. The clatter made him jump. "Elise," he said, eyebrows pinching. "I can't do this," I said. His hand froze midair. "What?" "This," I repeated, louder than I meant to. "The pretending. The fixing. The let's go away and maybe you'll want to have sex again vacation pitch." His face went pale, like I'd slapped him. "Jesus," he muttered. "I'm trying here. I'm trying to do something nice." "I know you are," I snapped. "And that's the problem. You think nice fixes it. You think a dinner and a trip is going to make me forget that I don't feel seen anymore." People were looking now, couples 2 tables over, the server who just froze mid-pour. I felt my chest tighten, my throat close. And still I couldn't stop. I'm so tired of being touched without being asked how I am. I'm tired of your hands on my skin when you don't even know what's happening in my head. He leaned forward, voice low. "Could we not do this here?" Tears burned my eyes. "Where, then?" "At home, in bed, when you roll over and I pretend to be asleep so I don't have to pretend I want you back." He leaned back, eyes wide and wounded. "You make it sound like I'm some kind of predator." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Silence swallowed the table. My chest was heaving now. A tear slid down, and I didn't wipe it. He pushed his chair back, gently, deliberately, and stood. "I'll get the check," he said, without looking at me. I stared down at the half-eaten risotto, at the napkin I twisted in my lap until it looked like a rope. My hands were shaking. On the way home, the car was silent. When we got inside, I went straight to the bathroom. I locked the door, slid down the wall, and sat on the tile floor like a child. The shame hit hard. Not because I'd spoken truth, but because I'd let it spill out like poison. I thought about that night at my grandfather's. How he looked at me with those old, weathered eyes and asked a simple question, "Are you happy?" And how I'd lied with my smile. I thought about how my grandfather had loved my grandmother, not perfectly, but deeply. How he used to read to her when her mind started slipping. How he held her hand until the last breath. I thought, is this what love looks like when it's dying? Or worse, when you're the one killing it? 2 weeks passed like fog rolling through a house, slowly, then all at once, until every room felt colder than I remembered. Daniel stopped reaching for me. There were no more kisses behind my ear, no more wandering hands during coffee or lazy fingers brushing mine on the couch. We became polite. Efficient. We shared space like coworkers. Like ex-lovers who hadn't officially ended it yet. I'd wake up to the sound of him closing drawers gently so he wouldn't disturb me. He used to tug the blanket over my shoulder, kiss the top of my head. Now he just moved quietly, like a guest in a room that didn't belong to him anymore. I missed him. But I didn't know how to reach for him without touching a bruise. One night, I stood in the hallway, watching him from the doorway of the living room. He was sitting on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, scrolling his phone, but not really looking at it. His shoulders looked tired. Not just from work, but from carrying something heavier than he was used to. I knew that posture. It was the same one he had after losing a patient. After watching someone's life slip through his fingers. It hit me then, he's grieving us, too. He wasn't the villain in our story. He never had been. He loved me the only way he knew how, steady hands, practical actions, kisses he thought were bridges instead of bandages. And I'd punished him for not knowing the language of my pain. Some nights, I lay awake next to him, listening to him breathe. I'd stretch my fingers just barely toward the middle of the bed, willing myself to reach across the gap. But I never did. He didn't either. One morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring into his coffee. He looked up when I walked in, and for a second there was something raw in his face, unguarded, vulnerable. "Morning," he said, his voice hoarse. "Hey," I answered, pouring my own cup. The clink of the spoon against porcelain felt too loud in the silence between us. After a pause, he asked, "Do you want me to stay somewhere else?" I blinked. "What?" "I mean, if you need space. Or if this is over and you just haven't said it yet." I stared at him. Not because I hadn't thought about it, but because hearing him say it out loud made it real. And it broke something in me. "I don't know what I need," I said. I miss how we used to be. And I don't know how to get back there." He nodded slowly. Looked down at his hands. "So do I." I watched him, this man who once carried me, literally, when I twisted my ankle hiking, who memorized the names of every character in my favorite books just to make me smile, who used to sing off-key in the car just to hear me laugh. And I realized, he was still him. Maybe quieter now. Sadder. But still him. The distance wasn't just space, it was fear. Fear of touching the wrong nerve. Fear of trying again and failing. And love, real love, wasn't just fire. It was choosing to stand in the ashes, together, and rebuild. So I stood there in our dim little kitchen, the smell of burnt toast in the air, and asked myself the only question that mattered: do I still want to try? And the answer came, not as a thunderclap, but as a quiet, aching whisper: yes. But not like this. It started, strangely, with the laundry. I came home late from work and found Daniel folding towels in the living room. Not his usual style, he never folded them the way I liked. But tonight, they were neat little squares, stacked in color order. A peace offering, maybe. He looked up when I walked in, not with hope or hurt, just with a quiet kind of recognition. "Hey," he said. "I didn't know if you were coming back." I set my keys down and sat on the edge of the couch, leaving space between us. "I wasn't sure either," I said honestly. Silence fell like soft snow. No tension. Just truth hanging between us. "I've been thinking," he said, folding one last towel, "that maybe we've been talking past each other for a long time. You want to be seen. I want to be wanted. And we keep missing the part where we both need something we're afraid to ask for." I swallowed. "I don't even know how to ask anymore." He nodded. "Me neither." And for a minute, neither of us moved. The quiet wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't cruel either. I turned to face him. "I don't know if we can fix this." "I don't either," he said. "But I'd like to try. Not to go back, because we're not who we were, but maybe to figure out who we are now. Together." There was no grand speech. No sudden kiss. Just his hand reaching slowly across the cushions. Palm up. An invitation. I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, gently, almost reverently, like he was holding something fragile. We sat like that for a long time. Saying nothing. Just breathing in the same space again. Later that night, I climbed into bed first. He lingered in the doorway for a moment, unsure. "You can sleep here," I said, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't undress. Didn't reach for me. Just lay down beside me, fully clothed, one arm behind his head, staring at the ceiling. After a while, I shifted closer. Not touching, just close enough to feel the warmth of his body again. He didn't speak. But before drifting off, he turned and pressed a kiss to my forehead. Soft. Careful. It didn't fix everything. But it didn't have to. It was enough to begin again. Even if I knew we'd never be the same. You know how there are certain questions that follow you? For me, it was something my grandfather asked a year before he died. We were sitting on the back porch, watching the light fade behind the trees. He didn't say much those days, his lungs were weak, and his grief over my grandmother still sat heavy on him like a second skin. But then, out of nowhere, he turned to me and asked, "Are you happy, Elise?" I laughed at the time. Said, "Yeah, of course," and waved it off. But that night? That question kept me up. It kept echoing. Because I realized, I didn't actually know. I think a lot of us confuse stability for happiness. We tell ourselves that if the bills are paid, the sex still happens sometimes, and no one's yelling, then we're fine. We're lucky. We should be grateful. But inside, we're starving. I wasn't unhappy because Daniel was cruel or selfish or unfaithful. I was unhappy because I felt alone inside something that looked like love from the outside. And I didn't know how to name that without sounding ungrateful. Here's what I've learned: after everything, desire doesn't survive in silence. Emotional intimacy doesn't grow where we're too scared to be honest. And love, real, adult love, can't breathe if it's constantly dodging unspoken truths. Daniel loved me. I never doubted that. But the way he loved me started to feel like something I had to perform for. I felt like a role I'd been cast in, the loving wife. The woman who still wants him. The one who doesn't make things complicated. But I am complicated. I want closeness that isn't always sexual. I want to be seen when I'm quiet, not just when I'm undressing. I want a partner who doesn't try to fix me with trips or dinners, but who's willing to sit in the mess with me and ask the hard questions. And the truth is, I didn't know how to ask for that until it was almost too late. There were days when I thought I'd leave. When I'd stare at the front door and wonder what it would feel like to walk out and start over. But I didn't. Not because I was scared, but because I realized something else that night with my grandfather: love is a choice. Not once. Not even daily. But moment by moment, over and over, choosing each other even when it's awkward, when it's distant, when it's damn near unbearable. So I stayed. But not in the way people mean when they say that. I stayed, and I started telling the truth. About my body. My fear. My resentment. My grief for the parts of us we'd lost. And to his credit, Daniel didn't turn away. He didn't always get it right. Sometimes he still reached for me in ways that felt like pressure. But slowly, he started to listen. And I started to speak. There are still quiet nights. There are still gaps between us that take time to cross. But now, when he holds my hand, I don't feel like I'm disappearing into the script. I feel like I'm being held. I don't know if we'll make it forever. I don't even know if forever is the goal anymore. But I know I've stopped pretending. I know I've started asking for what I need. I know I've stopped mistaking his desire for my obligation. So if someone ever asks you if you're happy, stop. Really stop. Not because you owe anyone an answer, but because you owe yourself the honesty. Desire fades. Skin changes. Even love, if we're not careful, can shrink into routine. But truth? Vulnerability? That's what keeps the fire from going cold. So yes. I'm happy. Maybe not in the way I thought I would be when we first fell in love. But in the way that matters now. The kind that's earned. The kind that's real. And the kind that no longer lives in silence.